Good afternoon, everyone. Trying to see who's out there, but it's kind of hard here on this tiny laptop. So I guess we can just get started, and hopefully if people haven't joined us yet, they will come while we're in progress. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This is actually our first, I think it is. It's our first Friday Munch and Learn of the semester. And last semester we were doing lunch and learns because we were having them in person at the Princeton Entrepreneurial Hub every Friday at 12:30, providing lunch for everyone. But unfortunately, since we are in a remote situation here, we hope that you're providing your own lunches. So I was thinking of different alums that I could get to speak today, and one came to mind who graduated 5 years ago, and he is an alumni of the ELAC Summer Accelerator Program, and he's now founder of two companies, which you can see on the screen, KLOS Guitars and Skillboard. So I met Adam around beginning of 2015. He had applied for the Summer Accelerator with his brother and a couple of others, and they were accepted to the program. And immediately we were just thrilled with the work that they were doing, building a carbon fiber guitar. Adam will tell you all about that. And they were living in Spelman at the time. And this is going to be embarrassing, Adam, but I recall getting a phone call from someone, either in public safety or EHS or something like that, saying that there was some kind of operation going on in Spelman. And it turns out that they were making their guitars in their dorm room over the summer. So we had to stop that operation pretty quickly, but I'm super proud of how resourceful they were. And they were able to pick up that operation and move it back to, I guess, a warehouse in Utah where they were based. Half the team stayed here and the other half went back. And they really made a lot of headway over the summer. They raised a ton of money on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and the rest, they say, is history. So I will pass it over to Adam Klosowiak, and I'll let him tell you more about starting that company and now the second one, Skillboard. So thank you so much, Adam, for being here today.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro. And I apologize in advance. My lungs and throat are recovering from a long run, so I'm going to be clearing my throat a little bit.
Why is that?
So yeah, one of the goals I had for this summer was to complete this ultra marathon that was about 40 miles and 20,000 feet of vertical gain at 10,000 feet of elevation, and just did it last weekend and survived. But definitely had its toll.
Well, I'm glad you made it back for this, so thank you.
That was one of the more motivating reasons, yeah. So yeah, I was talking with Stephanie about what we could talk about or what I could talk about, and I was thinking, this second company that I started, which I'll go into. I thought that there could be a lot of lessons learned going from a first company to a second company. And I realized most people haven't started a company, and some people are working on their first company and fewer people are working on their second company. So the talk isn't really as much about starting a second company, but it's kind of documenting the process of doing and learning from doing, and in so doing, building a toolkit that then, if you do have a second idea, you're able to implement and execute that idea much faster because of the way that you executed the first time. And so that's really the gist of what I'll be talking about, and I'll be using a lot of examples from both companies. But yeah, so to start, I want to talk first about KLOS Guitars and the background, how we started, what we make, and then kind of jump into the transition of Skillboard. So yeah, as Stephanie mentioned, we started KLOS Guitars. It was my brother and I, February of 2015. So about 5.5 years ago now. And the basic concept is wooden instruments are pretty fragile because wood is a fragile material, especially when you're using it for a guitar. You need to have very thin wood that can resonate, and thin wood inherently is susceptible to temperature changes, to humidity changes. If you drop it, it can crack easily or break. There's a famous video where United broke someone's guitar, and that someone was a pretty big musician, and so he made a YouTube video about it because they wouldn't compensate him for the damage, and it got 10 million views, and it kind of popularized the I'm scared to fly with my guitar because it might get shattered. So carbon fiber is what we use to build our instruments, and carbon fiber is a material that is used in almost everything now. Taking over high-end sports, so biking, mountain biking, road biking, hockey, golf, tennis, you name it. And it's an extremely resilient material, and so it's really good for instruments. And the basic idea when we were starting was carbon fiber instruments are very expensive, and we looked into the cost analysis and didn't see why they were as expensive as they were. And so we wanted to come up with an innovative guitar that used an innovative material that was launched on a more modern platform, so eCommerce versus the traditional manufacturer, supplier, distributor relationship. And we wanted to market them in an innovative way via Facebook, Instagram, Google marketing versus the traditional retail sales pitch. So that was kind of the concept for KLOS Guitars, and we started really putting a lot of effort into it that summer when we were doing eLab. We did a Kickstarter to launch. Our first Kickstarter was summer of 2015. It raised $33,000, and it sold 70 guitars, one of which was Stephanie's guitar. And it took us about 8 months to build those 70 instruments. and that the first 3 years were very painstaking, which I'll go into when I compare it to Skillboard. And so that was kind of the concept behind KLOS Guitars and the early beginning. And for context, it took us, our first year that we broke $1 million in sales was 2018. So it took about 3 years to get there. And Skillboard, for reference, we launched at the end of December, effectively at the beginning of 2020. And so far, we're already at 600,000 in revenue. And there's potential to break $1 million by the end of this year. If not this year, certainly next year. So, so to kind of jump into some of the lessons, with KLOS, it was my first company that I was starting. I really had no idea what we were doing. I didn't even know what Kickstarter was. I assumed if you make a Kickstarter that you'll share it with your family and friends, and magically you'll arrive at your funding goal, and you just have to keep telling people about it, and suddenly people will want to buy guitars. And it was a very hard process to, we didn't know really what marketing was. We didn't know what made a good Kickstarter, what made a bad Kickstarter, what were the variables. And it's interesting because that was our very first one. And with KLOS Guitars, we've done 8 Kickstarters, and we're actually launching our 9th one in a couple weeks. And throughout, each one we realized, okay, for a Kickstarter, you need a good video and you need a good campaign. And then you break down each one of those elements further. What makes a good video? It's got to be short. It's got to be succinct. You need to present the problem solution quickly and effectively, and then jump into some credibility, the background, the team, the technology, and then end with, pulling the heartstrings for a product. So for us, a guitar that is durable is great for traveling and keeping your music with you. So a lot of musicians, when they can't bring their instrument somewhere, especially if they're on vacation and they want to play their music, there's that longing for your instrument. So, we over time realized that is what we need to package into a quick video. And now when we make a video, we have a template, and that's something that we can quickly spin out. We can build a Kickstarter in about 3 weeks now that can be very effective for product launching. The campaign, in a similar way, you got to present it in a very clean way. You can't throw too much information at once. So kind of the takeaway from Kickstarter was, don't just launch one. Don't just spend a lot of time learning a platform to do it once. Launch something and build a template so that if you want to launch something again, if you have another idea, you think, okay, what did we do last time that we would have changed this time? What did we do well? What did we do poorly? How do we execute another idea? And for Skillboard, transitioning to that was extremely, extremely useful for us, because Skillboard, for the background on the product, Skillboard, I've got one here, is it's a very simple product. It's a board that has drip tape on it. It's kind of like a skateboard deck, so it's 8-ply, and the goal of Skillboard is to ride it on a ball instead of a cylinder. And it really is as simple as it sounds. It's a board and a ball, and the goal is to make the most challenging balance board out there in the whole world, which it's a small market, the balance board market, but it's a big enough market that a lot of people are interested. And the reason is balance is such a key part of every sport, and not just balance in one direction, like when you ride a balance board on a cylinder, but most sports require balance in a 360-degree range of motion. So if you're snowboarding on powder, you never exactly know where your center of balance is, and you need to react quickly. If you're running, if you're trail running, if you're cycling, if you're mountain biking, there's the 4 points of contact, both pedals, your arms. So every sport has fairly difficult balance, and training in one direction just isn't enough. And so we had the Skillboard for a long time, and my brother had made one. It wasn't called the Skillboard then, but he made a board in this shape about 8 years ago, and we would always ride it when we'd visit him from Chicago for ski trips here in Utah. And after 3 years of doing KLOS Guitars, we were thinking, we have now built up the toolkit of launching a company, launching a brand, launching a product. We have the sales channels down. We now have the toolkit to do this. And so even though it's a very simple product and we weren't sure if it would work, we knew enough of the tools that we could spend not that much time, because it was fairly efficient effort to launch it, see if it would take off. And if it didn't take off, that was a risk we were willing to take. And then we'd shut it down if it hadn't worked out. So that's kind of the backstory of Skillboard. And so talking about that toolkit, the very first one, I would say, is that crowdfunding platform. And so we were able to efficiently build the Skillboard Kickstarter. We started doing that last summer. And, right off the bat, we knew, okay, this is a very simple product, and simple products oftentimes can get destroyed on social media. Even now, we do get a lot of comments that are, is this seriously just a board and a ball? Like, what is this world coming to? And so we knew that to mitigate that risk of negative comments, and that's something we knew with KLOS Guitars. With KLOS Guitars, we got a ton of negative feedback because kind of the purists in the instrument world are always saying, "Oh, how can you make an instrument that's not out of wood? That's just sacrilege." And so we dealt with a lot of that negativity after launching. And so this time, before launching, we knew we're going to get negative comments for this. So how can we mitigate that? And one strategy was having really established, incredible athletes be part of our team and have testimonials from them, so that if someone wants to say this is a stupid idea, and then they see that a 4-time Olympian who's won World Cups is riding the board and thinks it's very effective and it helps their training regime, it's much harder for that person to then be like, this is really dumb, that Olympian, you know, there's no way. It becomes harder to criticize. And so so right off the bat, we recruited athletes. We did get a 4-time Olympian who lives here in Park City, who's a downhill skier. We got him on board. He gave us a great testimonial, actually uses the product. He recruited some other athlete friends who also got on board. And we kind of had that in place. And then we knew that the problem solution had to be presented quickly. So balance being a challenging thing and improving balance being a solution, and kind of connecting the dots. How do you improve your balance? Why is it important? What are some tools? Here's a good tool that we just came out with that is unlike anything on the market. And by the way, it's at a very affordable price. Here's how you purchase it on Kickstarter. And we were able to build this Kickstarter campaign extremely quickly. We spent maybe less than $1,500 on shooting everything, building it up. Not too much time was spent, and we launched in December, and expectations were completely blown out of the water. We raised $263,000 in 1 month, selling over 2,000 boards. And it's interesting too, because having already done 8 Kickstarters before that, I knew how to analyze the success of a Kickstarter. And within 2 days of launching, I knew that we were onto something. And so that's one example of don't just execute one time, but learn the process, learn the tool. Ask yourself while you're doing something, okay, we did this, did it go well? What would we do if we did it again? And if you always have that kind of mentality, it's much easier to then go back and do it again. I think many people do launch Kickstarters, and then when they're trying to launch something else, they kind of forget the details, make the same mistakes, don't learn from the first experience, and really the tool is almost more valuable than doing it once. So that
Adam,
was that. Yep.
I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a couple questions that actually are on that line, so I want to quickly send them out to you. The first is, how have you differentiated your brand from all other more established guitar brands? And then we also have, how did you decide to expand from guitars to Skillboard? And have you seen any negative impact by that product line expansion?
Yeah, so both good questions. On the guitar front, I would say we differentiated our brand. So there aren't many brands that use carbon fiber. So, you know, just by the nature of using that material, we're already quite unique. There are only 6 companies in the world that use carbon fiber in instruments. And we also wanted to differentiate ourselves, sort of like I mentioned in the beginning, by sales channel and by sales approach. So we wanted to have a clean website, which, believe it or not, in the guitar world, that's already sitting aside from a lot of other companies. We wanted to have a good online user experience. We wanted to have a good Instagram We wanted to make it easy to reach out to customer support. We wanted customer support to be available. Some of our competitors, if you want to buy them in a certain state, you actually just can't buy them in certain states because they don't have retailers there. They don't ship from their website, so you can only get it from a third-party website. So that was a big differentiating factor. And the brand itself, also, we wanted to market it in kind of a sleek, innovative, sounds good, but also is kind of a classy new technology brand, which is not that often that you'll find that in the acoustic world. I think electric guitars are more in tune with technology just by the nature of having an electric pickup, and those are always improving. Whereas acoustic guitars are more viewed as traditional. The best instruments are from the companies that have been around for almost 300 years, like Martin Guitars. So that was a big differentiating factor for the brand. And then deciding from guitars to Skillboard. So they're separate companies for a reason. I think there's very little overlap in brand, almost zero overlap between balanced words and instruments. And so we knew right off the bat that we don't want to have any association between the two. And so we started two completely separate brands. However, I think as both keep getting larger, there will be opportunities to cross promote. And, if the craftsmanship of guitars is high and our customers trust that brand, and then we launch an email that says, by the way, the founders of this company are also selling this awesome product, and vice versa, then I think that could be a positive impact. But it's also, the customer segment is so small. For KLOS, even the success that we've had is only about 6,000 customers, so we're not talking about huge numbers. So those are those questions. And another example of learning from the first attempt to the second is manufacturing. And so supply chain, manufacturing, and fulfillment, those are kind of three buckets that are extremely important for consumer products. And it's something that is often overlooked initially when someone is working on an idea. It's hard for me to believe this, but by the end of our eLab accelerator, when we were doing demo day and talking about KLOS Guitars, we didn't even have a slide about supply chain because we didn't know what supply chain was. And we assumed that if you order a part from someone, that they would deliver the part just how you designed it, with perfect quality and on time, which is something that just does not happen unless you put in a lot of work and all the right steps. Even companies that are, $100 billion companies experience these problems all the time. Like a friend of mine who works at Microsoft, he's on the supply chain team and flies to China, less so now, but consistently damage control on parts being made incorrectly by the hundreds of thousands and all the issues there. So kind of taking a step back with KLOS Guitars, we sold the 70 guitars in that first Kickstarter, and we ordered about 200 guitar necks from a supplier in China that we found via Alibaba. And little did we know, there are shell companies in China that are on Alibaba and talk and say they can make a certain part, and they're able to have the initial conversation of how they're going to make it, what their factory is, etc. But then as soon as you pull the trigger on the order, they delegate that or outsource that to another factory. And that other factory might be just a domestic manufacturer that doesn't export, which is important because typically exporting factories have higher quality than just domestic companies. And so we had made this order of 200 necks, and we were told a 2-month turnaround time. It turned out that the neck took about 7 months to make. It was the wrong shape, the wrong wood was used, the logos were crooked, the wrong color. And so all this came after we had received perfect samples. So, we got perfect samples. We were convinced. We pulled the trigger on a big order. We paid the order in full. We didn't realize that there's a process for putting down a deposit and then holding that as kind of leverage to get the product you need. There's a trade platform on Alibaba, which gives you trade assurance. We were not aware of that. So a ton of things with supply chain mistakes that caused huge delays, massive frustration, both on our end and to our customers. And I, at the time, was working remotely for KLOS because I was doing a Fulbright in Austria. And so I'd be emailing these customers every day for months saying, we're going to build your guitars. We're just waiting on some parts. And so that process, although it was extremely frustrating, we learned a ton. And we didn't just learn about how to do things correctly. We also made a lot of contacts, which I'll touch on kind of relationships at the end, and how important relationships are in starting a company, and not just not just getting what you want, but building a relationship so that you can then touch on it later if you do have other ideas. And so yeah, we finally got those necks. We built the first guitars. Some things we learned were, yes, you should go through a trade assurance platform. You should always do a deposit first. You should vet the factory for language barriers initially. And if the language is tough at the beginning, then you're going to have a long and hard road. And it's better to kind of nip that in the bud and find a better factory. Visiting the factory, that's something that was very hard for us to learn. We thought buying $1,000 flight at the beginning and flying to China was unnecessary, when my brother and I both put in about $5,000 into the business, which was everything that we had. And we were like, how could you justify spending 10% of your funds to go to China when they can send pictures, they can send videos? But in reality, going to a factory, inspecting their tools, if you look at their tools and see that all their saws are dull, then that tells you about the attention to detail. And going there, also, you meet the team, you see what you're working with. It can eliminate some red flags very quickly. So those are some of the things we learned, and applying that to Skillboard, it was night and day. With Skillboard, we knew that the product had to be high quality. Again, it's a very simple product, a board and a ball, and so the quality has to be something that can't be criticized. If the quality is very high end, then that helps you justify the simplicity of the product. So, yes, it is a simple product, but so is a skateboard. Skateboard is a wooden deck with 4 wheels and trucks in between that to connect the wheels to the board. And so knowing that, we were looking for a skateboard supplier. We found several. We got samples from all of them, and then we narrowed down 2 that were the best. We flew to China. We visited both, and we met with both, and then we placed an order with one of them. And then once they were done with the initial order, we flew there again to inspect the work, which was in process and also finished. And believe it or not, we actually caught a huge problem with our Skillboards. So we were joking in the beginning, instruments are so complicated and they have so many parts. This deck is going to be a breeze. It's a deck and a ball. Like, what can go wrong? and so much went wrong, surprisingly. But so fortunately, we caught it there at the factory. The ply direction, so the direction of the plywood is very important, because if you don't find the right orientation, then your whole deck will warp with time. And so you need a straight deck. So that was a mistake. The painting procedure was not being done correctly, and the boards just did not look very good when they were finished. The top layer of the deck, in order to have kind of the good stained look, has to be dyed. So you submerge that top layer into a bucket of, or a big kind of pan of stain, and that stains it all the way through. And what they were doing initially was just painting the stain on, and so it wasn't going all the way through, and it kind of looked sloppy. So we got there, we inspected everything, we had paid for everything with a deposit via trade assurance. So, you know, all the rules were on the table. We said, look, this is what we needed. This is not what we received. And if we don't receive this, then we'll get a refund from Alibaba, and the situation is cut and dry. There's no emotion in it. And our supplier, you know, they saw, we lay down all the cards on the table, they saw that. And they also, you know, we told them that we've grown another company before, and so we think that there's huge potential for this. And we told them that tens of thousands of orders would be coming if you nail this process, but our specifications have to be met in order for that to happen. And we had the confidence from the first experience to say that, and which, you know, would be hard to do if it was the first time doing that. And we had witnessed the growth of KLOS Guitars, and were able to say that. And so we worked through that order, and by the way, we did that whole process way before we launched Skillboards. We had bought 500 boards in October when we were launching in December, and we figured it is a risky move to buy so many boards before having sold any and before knowing if the reception would be good. But we are very aware of how long supply chain can take, and there are always unforeseen challenges, and that's why we started early. So I think that bucket of supply chain, there were a ton of examples of things we did poorly that we then learned, and again, sort of created a template for, you know, if I wanted to find a supplier today for anything, for manufacturing, you know, chairs or iPhone cables, I would know exactly what to do and how to go through that, and I wouldn't repeat any of the same mistakes from before. And I think that tool is almost, you know, it's more important than having done it twice with guitars and boards, because if another idea comes around in a few years, I'd be able to use that tool set to get through it.
So Adam, we do have a question that came in about the difficulty of manufacturing. What led you to start KLOS Guitars and Skillboard yourself, rather than patent and license your ideas to other companies?
Yeah, I think so. Both, the question is kind of product specific. So with carbon fiber instruments, we did think about, and we still are thinking about, licensing. It really is an incredible material, and, you know, it's undeniable that Fender or Gibson or Ibanez, those companies would have a better chance of popularizing the material than we do. You know, if Fender launched a carbon fiber guitar and promoted all the qualities of carbon fiber and why this is now the new thing, that would certainly blow the material up way more than KLOS Guitars could. But I think there's something to be said about starting a brand and building it up from the ground. You know, part of it is almost selfish reasons, in that from the perspective of learning, I've learned so much from starting the brand, and I think that learning would have been cut short if we had made the technology, licensed it, which would have been very difficult anyway. You know, carbon fiber guitars have been around for 30 years. And the fact that Fender hasn't made one, I think, is a conscious choice. They're definitely aware of carbon fiber instruments. So to license them that's something that isn't a given. It's something that potentially wouldn't work even if you tried. And I think it's so fun to start a brand and have kind of a niche, small brand that people do know about. And now we are kind of known in the guitar space for that niche. And to have our own customers, to have the experiences that we've created for thousands of people all over the world is something that is tough to beat. And so that's on the guitar front. We're not excluding working with other companies down the line. We're actually working on some pretty cool technology for our new carbon fiber necks that I think could work with other companies, where we could manufacture a Fender neck, for example, out of carbon fiber and either become a supplier or license the technology to them. And we could do that in complement with still running our own brand. And for Skillboard, I don't even know who I would license Skillboard to. It's funny, the balance board market, I think, is also very antiquated. And again, it's funny saying that because it's such a small market. But even Indo board, which that's the board that you ride on a cylinder, that's quite popular. Their website looks like it was made in the 90s. I wouldn't say they've nailed digital marketing. I think we're more positioned and better positioned to become bigger than them versus licensing our concept to them. So I think, and with that too, it does seem very fun to build a huge athlete network, get a ton of these awesome contacts involved, build a cool product, and maybe make the best known balance board company in the world over 5 to 10 years. That strikes me as much more fun than having the product and then just kind of giving it away and doing something else. So those are those questions.
Yeah, there's a couple more coming in. I can read them out to you. So the first is, what were you doing before KLOS, and how did you decide to pursue it full time?
Yeah. So before KLOS, I started KLOS my senior year at Princeton, and I was very keen on doing an international fellowship after graduating. And so I lined up an English teaching Fulbright in Austria afterwards, and it was kind of a non-negotiable for me to do that. And that was a difficult conversation that I had to have with my brother, who he was on the manufacturing side and I was on the business side, but the business side was pretty constrained by the manufacturing side at that time. And so the argument there was, I can work on the business and plan what we'll do once we do have inventory, but we really need supply chain and manufacturing and inventory figured out before I can really hit the ground running. And so I did that Fulbright for a year, and then after that, we still weren't ready with everything to go full steam. And so I did a year of consulting, management consulting with Strategy and in DC. And it wasn't until our third Kickstarter that raised over 300,000. We sold 500 guitars in a month, where at that point I knew the potential was there for my full time, and there was enough to do already for 2 years, but that was kind of the point where we had the funding. My risk was mitigated because although being an entrepreneur, I am still fairly risk averse. I like putting my effort towards something that I do think has actual potential, and I see a path to viability. So I think my criteria were met, and it was after 2 years of kind of part-time KLOS, even though it was a lot of work, that I went full-time.
We have another question too. So how do you balance managing multiple companies at once? How have you had to hire to help you make this be possible? And what part of running KLOS is still most exciting for you?
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I saw who asked the
Bal-
question. Sorry.
yeah, I mean, is actually the guy that I ran the ultra marathon with.
Wow, nice.
And we met through that talk.
Very cool. And he was in the lab in the past. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we met at that talk at eLab 3 years ago.
Nice. Sorry.
And I wanted to actually touch on that example towards the end when I talk about relationships. But yeah, it's definitely challenging running multiple companies, and I often feel scatterbrained and like I'm biting off more than I can chew. But the key, I wouldn't be able to do 2 year one companies. I think that some people could probably do it, but I just could not pull that off. KLOS Guitars has gotten to the point that it's fairly stable from a sales channel standpoint. So we have all of our ads in place. We have an ad agency that I have weekly calls with to check in on that. I have a production manager. We have 16 manufacturing employees who all know their job well. The production manager directly manages them. There's a customer service manager and a fulfillment manager. And so for daily operation, I'm not that necessary at KLOS Guitars. However, my main value add there now is kind of the bigger marketing pictures and also optimizing everything. So there is still a lot to optimize for manufacturing. There's a lot to optimize for supply chain. But it's easier to, you can not optimize for 2 months and things will still run. So it's easier to step away and come back. Marketing initiatives, improving every sales channel, those are all important things. But if your baseline is functioning, again, you can kind of step away a little bit. And you can also hire for those roles because it's a more concrete deliverable, right? Hey, okay, we have a website, we need to optimize it. Our conversion rate is good, but it can be better. This is what I need you to do. And then I can hire someone and they get to work on that while then I become kind of more the supervisor and checking in. And so it's easier to hire in a more established company because there's a more defined problem and solution and goal. And with Skillboard, it's still very much emerging what has to be done. What is the solution? How will this become bigger? We haven't yet really sold on our website. So what is that going to look like? We haven't sold to stores. So what is that system going to look like? There's a lot of discovering and figuring out. And that to me is actually the most fun part of starting a company. And so that is something that I want to be very involved with. So right now I'm probably about 75% Skillboard, 25% KLOS, and that fluctuates day to day, week to week, just kind of whatever the need is. And there are both companies have red flags that come up, and we still have fires all the time with both. And so as something arises, the flexibility has to be there to, okay, today I need to do accounting all day because taxes are due in a couple of weeks, and that's a priority. Or we just had a huge supply chain problem and we need to find another supplier. We're going to devote all my attention to that. So I think it's a balance of prioritization, and it is really fun actually trying to balance between the two. And when it does work out, it's very rewarding. But there definitely, I can't deny there are days where it's just you end the day with having achieved 5% of your to-do list and you just feel like garbage because people are waiting on you. When you have more employees, they need your approval or your guidance or direction. And when you don't give that, you feel like they're not operating efficiently because of you. And so there are a lot of hardships, but that's kind of what you sign up for when you're not just doing one company but multiple. So yeah, so that's that question. And let's see. So supply chain, that was kind of the example of build a toolkit for coming up with for making something happen. So if you need a supplier, don't just get the part that you need, but learn how to get parts, and that will serve you better than a one-off solution. I wanted to talk about so fulfillment is also a really interesting topic. With Skillboard, with KLOS Guitars, we fulfill everything ourselves. We get parts from suppliers, we build it in Provo, Utah, we ship it from there, and that that works because our volume is quite low, and it's been really fun setting up a production line, but it's been extremely challenging as well. And just hiring, training, quality control in-house, over 100 parts, over 100 processes between all three instruments. And so with Skillboard, we knew that it was a very simple product, and we knew the volume was going to be high. And kind of that experience from KLOS Guitars made us think we just want to outsource the product entirely, and not just outsource manufacturing, but we also want to outsource fulfillment. Even if we had a perfect product, we wouldn't want to be shipping 1,000 Skillboards in a week or in a month from our warehouse in Provo. And the logic behind that was, I think, it kind of comes down to focusing on what you're good at and specializing. Us shipping something versus a third-party logistics company shipping something doesn't affect really the customer user experience at all. If you're both able to ship the same way, then I would much rather spend our time on the marketing side and on the customer experience before and after they buy a product versus spending time building up a fulfillment team, optimizing shipping labels, all that cost. So that was one thing that, through the process, through KLOS Guitars, I learned that time is limited and you really have to focus on what matters. And with Skillboard, from the beginning, we were like, okay, we're not going to manufacture, we're not going to ship, we're going to focus on the marketing, and that's going to be the bulk of the team. And so it was really right off the bat when we sold the 2200. For about a month, I spent a lot of time talking to third-party logistics companies, getting quotes from everyone on shipping internationally, shipping domestically. How do they ship? What are all the costs? And logistics is an absolute beast when you're shipping in volume. Some of these companies send 50,000 packages a day. I mean, they're like mini Amazon warehouse fulfillment centers. And so that was one thing that I think through doing once, you then ask yourself, not only what do you enjoy doing, because that's also important. I think everyone settles into where they like spending their time. Like, do you like working with customers or do you not like working with customers? My brother, for example, doesn't enjoy working with customers too much because for him, he usually deals with customer problems. So I think he has that association, but he prefers that I'm customer facing, and I love talking to people and love being social. So that's a more natural role for me. Just like I don't enjoy sitting in CAD all day and working on the minutia, I prefer having the CAD drawing finished and executed and then working with the finished product. So, finding what you do like in your first experience, I think is a process of reflection and thinking, and then you apply that to the next company. So, because I love marketing so much, that's something that I wanted to focus on in Skillboard. That was a really good learning experience. And then you also need to, it's not just what you like doing, but also what you're good at and what matters. If something doesn't add value, then you have to trim the fat and not have that take up your day, because there really is so much limited time when you're working on several things. So that's kind of the fulfillment example. And I wanted to talk about kind of relationships, and that's probably the last point I would make, as far as learning by doing, and then creating, having your second idea in mind. I think oftentimes, it's funny, my parents are from Poland, and they raised us to be extremely polite kids, to the point that it was almost awkward how polite we were. Like, we always said thank you a ton. After I'd have dinner at a friend's house, my mom would make me call their mom and thank them over the phone. We had sleepovers, always had to call and thank them for hospitality. And it taught me from an early age that I think being grateful and showing appreciation goes a long way. And especially when you're starting a company, you're going to interact with a lot of people through every facet of the company. You'll interact with your customers, you'll interact with your suppliers. If you don't know what you're doing, which at the beginning you usually don't, we didn't know what trademarks were, we didn't know what patents were, we didn't know what an LLC or a C Corp was. And for all these questions, you have to find an expert or someone to teach you, either a mentor or an expert who's provided to you, which was, that was one of the great things about eLab. They provided you with a lot of experts, so you didn't have to do that searching process. But a few examples that, you can either approach a problem with a one-time solution and get what you want, and then kind of, okay, that person served their purpose, I got what I want, now I'm going to move on because I know. But if you have the approach of, that person is very helpful, they really helped me here, I'm going to spend a little more time getting to know them, they get to know me, sort of make a friend in that. An example was when we were learning about trademarks. I filed all the trademarks myself, but in order to do that, I had to learn from this trademark expert that we met through eLab. And, after I filed, I kept him updated on how it went. Over the years, I've sent updates to some of those early mentors of how things are going. And it makes it so much easier than when you say, hey, I have a second company. We now have enough funding to pay for services, and I was thinking about you. You can reach out to that contact, and it's not like, oh, hey, like, I talked to you for an hour and gave you all this help, you never even sent a thank you email. Or and so I think keeping in mind, you're not just doing this one time, but you're leaving a trail of who you are and your reputation, what people think of you. And it's going to be sometimes much more valuable to have that reputation and relationship than the actual solution that you're looking for in the moment, because you never know what's gonna happen down the line. Just like, being nice to a customer, that customer potentially has connections to instrument stores, to musicians, or they might know a famous athlete and they might be willing to share their network with you. So you really never know. And so it benefits you to, in starting anything really, but in starting your first company, to always think about, okay, well, I'm building my network here. If I ever need a trademark person, I'm going to need that contact. If I need a supplier, if I need a translator, if I need anything, it's good to have good relationships versus just getting what you need one time. So yeah, that's kind of the takeaway. I think those are some examples and stories from KLOS Guitars and Skillboard, and how we got through both. Skillboard is on track to do what KLOS Guitars did in 3.5 years, in less than a year. So I think there definitely are efficiencies that you gain It's very product dependent, but it's really fun to have the confidence from your first experience and start applying it to a second one. And I think the way to build that is through analyzing what you're doing while you're doing it, and kind of optimizing that how process, internalizing that, taking good notes. I use Evernote for my note taking, and every call that I have with anyone, I always document it in Evernote, and I can quickly pull and draw on that with anything. If there's anything that's repeatable, I always make a note and jot down the instructions, screenshot different software instructions, not only to delegate eventually, but to down the line reteach yourself, because there are a lot of things that you forget how to do with time. And so, yeah, happy to take any questions about anything that I talked about.
Thank you so much, Adam. I actually have a couple questions for you. One's about KLOS, so I'll ask that one first. So your company is existing completely on, first you did Kickstarter, and now you're just doing straight internet sales, and you've never taken any VC. Have you ever thought about doing it? And have you ever thought that you could grow exponentially larger if you did, or do you want to stay where you're at and keep this, all of your slices of pie for yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. We definitely have thought about VC and what that would do for our growth trajectory. Our episode didn't air, but we were on Shark Tank 2 years ago.
What? I didn't know this.
Yeah, it was, we couldn't really talk about it at the time.
Oh, okay.
But
I'm gonna
yeah,
have to look it up.
Yeah, so we went through a very rigorous process of evaluating taking on funding and what we'd use that funding for. The reason we haven't is honestly largely because of the availability of crowdfunding. Whenever we need capital, we can launch a product that's even a slight variation of an existing product, and it raises at least 100,000. And so, yeah, I think there definitely is going to be a point where it will make sense to take on funding to grow faster. I don't think we're there yet, and especially now during coronavirus, I think it's a slightly risky move to take on a higher risk profile. But eventually, I think when we get to the point where, and we've never yet been in this point, but if we have too much inventory, we're maximizing sales channels, or we've discovered a new sales channel that works. For example, working with dealers is something we started doing last year, and it was going well until the pandemic. But if we can get into 100 stores and then say, okay, we need $1 million in order to get to 1,000 stores, and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to expand our inventory like this. We're going to spend this much on sales reps, and this is the path forward. And if we don't do this, it'll take 5 times as long to get into 1,000 stores. That's when I would reach out to a VC and make it pretty clear what that expansion plan would be.
Okay. So then my second question, I know we're like pretty much out of time, but I actually pulled up your Skillboard website, which is really, really nice, by the way. And I was thinking, like, the comparisons with both skateboards and snowboards is, have you thought about making them customizable, like art-wise, like different, designs and logos and things like that, because on skateboards, like, you've got all these different cool things on the bottom and top. Have you thought about that, or are you just keeping it simple and basic?
Totally. Yeah. We are planning on doing that eventually. We want to have kind of a staple, the cash cow product, as it's called. We want that in stock and inventory and selling effectively. And then, eventually we want to partner with artists to make really cool artwork, either on the top or bottom of the Skillboard, and, partner with them. I think that'd be a really cool thing to do. Make it kind of a limited edition type
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. Like you could partner with different artists that might cost a little more, but then, whoever's buying it is going to have, that unique art on their Skillboard. So
Exactly.
talk. I mean,
Sorry?
he bought your guitars, right?
Yeah.
On.
Yeah. I actually, I messaged Tony Hawk about the Skillboard, but it was at an event here. There was a grand opening of this place called Woodward. It's like a trampoline skateboard park. And he was too busy to look at it then, but his right-hand man, Andy McDonald, he actually rode the Skillboard, and we sent him one, and he posted about it on his Instagram. He's, top 5 skaters in the world.
Cool.
But yeah, no, the artwork and the partnering with artists, I think we can make limited editions for certain athletes, like a Tony Hawk model, or the Olympics are coming up next year. We're thinking of doing maybe like all the flags on the front or back. A lot of cool things that you can do to kind of touch on different sports, different people. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I think we should probably wrap up. We're almost out of time. I think there's one more question came through. Hold on a second, Mike.
Yeah, we do. So actually it's just a question. Can any attendees contact you directly regarding partnerships if they have a patent pending on a product that might be of interest to you? And also, this person wants to know if the Keller Center provides any assistance to recent alumni seeking to license our products.
Oh, well, that might be more for me to answer, but yeah, Adam, you can answer the first one.
Yeah, my email is just adam@klosguitars.com. That's KLOS. And yeah, anyone can contact me with questions about anything. Happy to give back, since I've gotten so much help over the years.
Yeah, and Rohan, you can also you can reach out to me directly, slanders@princeton.edu. That's S, my first initial. Okay, there it is. It's in the chat. Slanders@princeton.edu, and we can discuss that. So thanks for your questions, Rohan. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have. And Adam, I really wanted to thank you. It was great seeing you today. I'm glad you made it back in one piece from your big marathon thing. And thanks for being here. This was super insightful, and I'm sure everyone who listened has learned a lot. I know I did about the Skillboard, and we're definitely going to be tapping into you more, because I think that our up and coming eLab future teams can learn a lot from you. So really appreciate you taking the time today to be here
my
with
pleasure.
us. All right.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone
have a
for
great
listening.
weekend. All right. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.